Cuando anuncien va con Tani.
Just a couple of minutes so people can log on and we will start.
Hazel, if you think something is not clear, invent yourself a question and play as if you were somebody or yourself and place it. What I want to stress is that a gender studies program at UNAM is interdisciplinary, it's very political, is full with activism, but also very conceptually oriented, very theoretical. So it's like an oxymoron, you know? It has to do a lot with intervention, but it strives very highly for theoretical knowledge. So if you think it's not clear, please invent a set of questions, or you just ask. I'm Mariquita Perez, and my question is this and that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to start now. So, welcome to everyone. Welcome to this last session for the speaker series on the US-Mexico bilateral relation. I am very happy to welcome everyone, and also very happy for the topic that we will be exploring today that has to do with gender studies. So before I introduce our speaker this afternoon, I would like to thank the US Embassy for their support, the Study Abroad Office in the Department of State, and of course, Comexus for all of the support that we have been receiving from our staff in the back office to go on with this series. This series was thought of by these three institutions in order to provide undergraduate students in the United States a broader view of this bilateral relation, and we hope the topics that are most important in it, in order to hopefully entice everyone to think of Mexico as a study abroad destination. So please, in the chat, we will write our website address so people can look at it if you are interested after we finish this, this conversation, in looking at the different grants that we have available. Or also you can write us an email in case you're still not at that point, but you have questions and hopefully we can answer them. So let me introduce today's speaker. We have Marisa Belausteguigoitia. She is a PhD in ethnic studies with an emphasis on women, race, and sexuality at the University of California at Berkeley. A full professor at the School of Humanities at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, UNAM, our national university, the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She's the coordinator of curricular innovation from the Gender Critical Theory and Cultural Critique Perspectives in Graduate Studies at the Humanities at UNAM, and advisor to the Commission on Human Rights of Mexico City. She chairs the program, the Gender Studies program at UNAM, and usually she works analyzing the relationship between critical pedagogies, artistic and judicial practices from a gender perspective to focus on women's access to justice. She works with women in prison, bringing academia towards the activation of academic knowledge from a pedagogical, artistic, and judicial angle. She is the director of the project Spiral Turns, Judicial System, Gender Perspective, and Pedagogies in Resistance since 2008, an academic and activist initiative that fosters women access to real justice through practices of pedagogical, judicial, and artistic intervention in prison. The project has produced a variety of visual, textual, and judicial material, murals in prison, fanzines, documentary and short films, Amicus Curiae, Benefit for Women in Prison, Reports on Violation of Rights in Female Prisons, among others, and has created the Clinic of Public Interest, Marisa Escobedo, that works with specific cases of female judicial mistreatment in order to render the gender biased exercise of faulty justice against women visible. Currently, the Clinic of Public Interest, Marisa Escobedo, the judicial part of the project she directs, is working on 3 cases of women mistreated by the judicial system, waiting to be resolved by the Supreme Court. Her teaching and research analyzes the imperative of public university in participation in the solution of current social urgencies, that is to say, the activation of academic knowledge for social intervention, the bridging of academia towards activism, particularly through the interaction of artistic, judicial, juridical, and pedagogical practices from a gender perspective in women's full access to justice. Her work has been recognized with several awards, and I'm not going to read them all because she has many, many awards. She also has published around 90 articles and essays, and she has taught at a various number of universities. So thank you very much, Marisa, for being this afternoon with us and sharing your insights on this important topic.
Thank you so much, and excuse me for such a lifelong, it should have been 4 sentences. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you. Should I begin? Okay. Thank you so much to the US Embassy, to Comexus and Fulbright, but especially to Araceli Parterroyo, who has devoted decades to understand the relation between Mexico and the US and to deepen that encounter. I'm very grateful to Araceli, not only of inviting me, but the whole marvelous work she has done in her lifelong history in the relation of US and Mexico, which is a complex and extremely brilliant one. When I was invited by Araceli Parterroyo to open Mexico to you, to incite and invite you to study in Mexico, I couldn't help thinking on Mexico's unique way, on the one hand, to enjoy deeply life, and on the other, on the manners my country faces challenges, situates dilemmas, and confront paradoxes related with gender, violence, and crime. A coin of 2 opposite sides, joy and grace, paradox and contradiction. How to picture Mexico and its paradoxes, its land, its academic strengths, its history, identity, personality, its art, its character and culture, and more the way women and other sexual minorities protest, exist, intervene in order to incite you to come here? What may animate you to leave your zone of comfort and be exposed to the unknown or to the unpredictable and in relation to academic horizons? What I want to do in this brief talk is offer you 3 ways to lean out, to pick, and to look into Mexico for change and intellectual adventures of problems and themes related to gender. The 3 dispositives to perceive and probably understand Mexico and its opportunities on gender are a window out, a crack to pick, and a border to cross. Around them, we're going to explore Mexico as a contradictory space, as a paradox, and with it an opportunity to understand profoundly issues on justice, on solidarity, on the construction of critical knowledge and process and protest related to gender, for the construction at the end of a better world for everyone, but for the moment immersed in multiple contradictions. Within the concerns around justice, women in Mexico and Latin America have been extremely active, and the translation into and incorporation of their action into academic language at UNAM has been explicit and very efficient. If you're interested in justice, in protesting for making visible what is concealed by hegemonic forces like the state, or paradoxically, actions propelled positively by the same state you criticize, if you lean to a special window or crack or border for the actions led by women or sexual minorities, if you're interested in finding places and themes deeply immersed in history and the rescue of indigenous and traditional practices offered by feminism and women in relation to nature, water, and ecological knowledges, if you think reality is mainly mixed and paradoxical, and women represent one of the most salient ones, they are the poorest, the less educated, but one of the most active groups, Mexico may be a place for you. This conference may not be for all, but it is for all who are looking for justice and a complex and paradoxical intervention of power in the fight for women's access to justice. We will organize this talk around windows, I told you, cracks and borders, and specific scenes of gender and women at UNAM. UNAM, I think you know it, is the National Autonomous University of Mexico. It's a huge public university, around 350,000 students and 80,000 professors. It's a city. It's called Ciudad Universitaria, the university city. First of all, I will offer you a window to see where my opinions come from. According to Bauman, a window is a space to lean on, to bend to the right and to the left, to be able to reach out and see, to lift your head and perceive what is not easily outside, what is on the other side of the fence. A window is a device to lift your head. Some details through my personal window. I'm a full professor at UNAM in the fields of gender, critical pedagogy, and artistic practices. I work mainly in prison and with women. And I work with pedagogical, juridical, and artistic practices inside the education and juridical system in Mexico, rooted at UNAM, at this public university. I was born in Mexico City, daughter of exiles and refugees from the Spanish Civil War, 1936, 1939, ages ago, almost 100 years. Mexico has been for many, a very much expected, long place to live. Historically, it has opened its door for refugees and exiles of different countries, experiencing coups, golpes de Estado, and other horrors, mainly through the 20th century, but also today. Perhaps you only know Mexico as an expelling country, that is, a territory that produces migrants crossing the US border. Historically, Mexico has been a haven for persecuted groups and people that fought for freedom and equality and democracy in their countries. Spanish Civil War in the 30s, Second World War in the 40s, and 70s and 80s, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Guatemala, Salvador, Colombia, and countries prosecuted because of their political ideas. Incredible pedagogues, teachers, academics, journalists came here to go on with their lives related with freedom and democracy. As a daughter of exile and refugees, I grew up in Mexico wondering why my grandfather, a Spanish exile, showed consistently a shadow of sadness, a kind of chiaroscuro in his life. Slowly, I understood that through his sadness, I was peeking into the life of my elders and towards the lost world and its friction with the new one, with Mexico, through a tenuous but defined light that comes through cracks. I don't know if you like Leonard Cohen, but he has this wonderful song that is, there is a crack on everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how the light gets in. I guess you have to be more than 35 or 40 or 50 to know Leonard Cohen, but he's wonderful. My family, from my mother's side, another refugee woman, were strongly involved in the educational project of the Spanish Republic, Institución Libre de Enseñanza, a freedom institution. Equality, creativity, access to justice, solidarity involved this educational project. An incredibly socialist project, which my grandfather and mother, but mainly my grandfather, an historian, a lawyer, a painter, a poet, contributed to create. It was a project that was taught by Francisco Giner de los Rios in the late 1900s it seems long ago, but the ideas are very current, as you will see. My mother and many other women refugees integrated in our educational system in Hayes in Mexico, and precisely at UNAM, this educational project. Mexico and UNAM become the terrain where this incredible and advanced at that time, and this one project, creative, pedagogical, would be applied and integrated. Teaching and learning, writing and reading will have to do and had to do with freedom, equality, solidarity, ecology, and life, with the idea of discovering and enjoyment attached to learning. Special attention within this educational pedagogical project was placed on women. All these refugees and mainly women brought from Spain this project in the 40s, and it has been developing at UNAM. So what I want to convey to you is that we have spread out in decades a pedagogical project that has to do with creativity, with practice, with the development of theory and practice, with a lot of also of enjoyment. It has to do with energy and enjoyment, and that's it. That is a very Mexican thing. It's not only studying seriously and directly, but with energy, with enjoyment, and with a lot of intervention in social urgencies. An accent at UNAM. UNAM is National Autonomous University. When I say UNAM, I'm referring to my university, by the way, the oldest with Guatemala in the whole Americas, including Canada and the United States, and one of the best, I think it's second in Latin and the Americas. An accent and UNAM have been placed into teaching and researching along gender lines. Women in the fourth wave, that is currently with the whole protest in the city, the intervention with monuments and against gender violence, and in your country, what I see happening with Roe versus Wade, which is scary, protesting, violence, disappearance, and also issues around labor, care, and the special place indigenous and ancient practices around el buen vivir, the life that is good without exploitation, and ecological practice are strongly stressed at my university. Many refugees, including my family, who later reinvented this method, this pedagogical method, this incredible creative project in Mexico and at UNAM, lost everything in the war. As you will see, I work with women that lost everything, women in prison, and also with students of first generation in Mexico. 80% of students at UNAM are first generation in bachelor. A marginal growing group that needs special attention when arriving at the academic world. No walls full of books, white vacuums, and absence of a reading culture mark these first generation groups. This resonance with losing and giving, a war, a world, a living educational project, mainly represented by women, was an inspiration for me. Education, creativity, art, literature, equality, and justice related to women and sexual minority projects are long-lasting themes at UNAM, shedding light into women's obscure lives. This was a brief image emanating from the crack that look inside a whole set of projects at my university that may be found in the Bachelor of Pedagogy, Arts, Critical Criminology, and Graduate Studies in Gender. I will show you some of the themes that are studied in pedagogy. And I will begin with forensic science or critical criminology with a perspective of gender. And what we studied, and this is a bachelor degree, we don't have minor and minors like you. We studied, we have a lot of optional studies inside, which you can choose in the whole university. Imagine we are 350,000 students, and we have more than 140 different fields of study that you can combine. So, you know, the array of possibilities is huge, but let's think about criminology. We studied who is a victim, no? Who can claim to be a victim, and what are victims, and also arrange along intersectionality, around race, around sexuality, and around gender and class. Human rights, gender criminology through a gender perspective, forensic sexuality, and penal law, and the theories of misdemeanors and of wrongdoing, but always related to intersectionality and gender. Wait, sorry. Now I will leave the PowerPoint. I hope not only PowerPoint, but points of power. Let's see if that is a reality. There is another special kind of light, a special crack that comes through Mexico's special arrangement of its fulgor, its effulgence. Mexico City's light, blaze, brightness, brilliance has one effect. It cannot be looked straight into the eye. It can only be seen laterally. I derived through that lateral seeing an oblique gaze that was really helpful to compose my theoretical side. Things that place cannot be looked directly into the eye. In my work with women in prison, we developed a pedagogical method based in the educational project of the Spanish Civil War, but including gender perspective. I could see further than precarious women, criminals that did lost everything. In the way they related with being granted opportunities, pedagogical opportunities developed at the border of academia and activism on the district of Numan, they developed women full of light, like my city. I saw threads of fulgor emanating from prison. Another crack that dominated my career was the social clashing, the racial difference, and the lack of justice people in Mexico endure. This light, rights, access to justice, transitional justice with gender perspectives, is being spread within prison projects in bachelor and graduate studies, law, gender studies, pedagogy, and art. We have a very strong project related with prisons and with justice. Not only justice, but transitional justice and art related to equality and also related to social justice. For me, Mexico, and especially Mexico City, represent a contradiction, a challenge, not only, ¿qué pasa? I'm not moving this, wait. No, gracias. A challenge, not only to the gaze, but to the very act of looking. Its incredible refulgence collides with its opacity in politics and democracy. Culturally and artistically, a marvel. Infinite, colorful, and on the other hand, abysmally obscure. One of the texts that I recommend to read and with it understand a bit of Mexico and its gender relations is Rosario Castellanos' Balún Canal. It narrates, full of paradoxes and contradictions, the relation between different others, Indians and whites. In this case, an Indian nanny and a 7-year-old girl. To this kind of readings, mainly related to gender narratives and intersectionality, an exposure to profound uneven gender and racial relation of power may be provided. These are some of the texts that are read in the field of literature, or in the field of art, or in the field of humanities. During the 4 decades, I have been professor at UNAM at the School of Humanities, teaching gender, and as chair of the Gender Studies program, I learned that social justice and gender need to be claimed not only through logical, academic, conceptual, and reasonable knowledge, but through artistic, aesthetic, poetic, and political understanding. Mexico and the academic opportunities at UNAM, especially in the humanities, but also in the sciences, may be a space for academic and activist, politic and aesthetic, artistic, but also related to justice, knowledge, a space for creativity and exploration, especially in issues related to gender and intersectionality. I was confronted very early in my life with contradiction and paradoxes. My parents lost everything and developed a life of joy, freedom, and understanding. In a country of light and shadows, chiaroscuros, I gathered, in my experience at UNAM, a translucent map, a pedagogy of incandescency and imaginary to be able to cope with gender contradiction and its paradoxes. I want to offer you some scenes where I concealed my contradictions, not to make them opaque, but to work with them through them and its multiple cracks, windows, and borders. My mother, an academic at UNAM of quantum mechanics, professor in chemistry, used to take us to the university when we were kids. The most beautiful place in the earth for me, full of murals, more than 130 murals. It's a city, it's huge and beautiful. Colorful paintings, gardens, young people. Today, my university is part of the UNESCO patrimony. I grew very close to the classroom as an innovative and inventive space. Chemistry building was in the midst of a green space surrounded by murals, flowers, garden, beautiful buildings, patios, and fountains. These are some of the murals. This is the main library. This is Siqueiros, and it's one of the most important murals. Is let's bring to the people education and critical education, and that's it. My mother taught quantum mechanics on Saturdays when we played outside. Sometimes she took me to her class. I remember I was probably 5 years old, dancing and singing on her teacher's desk of quantum chemistry. And my mother's students laughing and being amused by my performance. After that short entertainment, my mother filled the blackboard with difficult equations to clear the unknown, the X in an equation, despejar la incógnita in Spanish. This was the way for my mother and for a generation to teach difficult issues like quantum chemistry, curiosity, mystery, humor, science as something alive, full of challenges and incognitas. They related also with cancer. I remember, and my mother told me also, a lot of the different very, very abstract knowledges, because it is a public university, are tried to derive or related to social urgencies. In this case, they were trying to relate this with the most important discoveries around cancer. The X, the enigma inside the classroom and the equation, was patiently and creatively resolved. An exciting pedagogy that built up with the pedagogical project of the Lost Spanish Republic and the freedom encountered on the City of Light. This became one of the goals of my life, to build knowledge, to clear the X, the unknown, the enigma in spaces full of passion, relation with social urgency, creativity, especially underlined by women experiences and protest. It was filled of women protests those years also. We were in the 80s. Sooner than later, I understood in my early academic teaching at UNAM that the only way to position appropriately the elements of the equation to clear the problem were through critical thinking, artistic, creative actions related with an activated academia, very much fostered at this public institution. That is something that you can find inside our public university. The relation of theory and practice, the intervention of women concerns and demands organized around disciplines, mainly pedagogy, law, and art, and interdisciplines, best to be found in graduate studies like the one gender studies offer. We have a very intense and bright PhD on gender, which has an offering on specialization, which is in the middle of bachelor and master, and a master degree and a PhD degree. I guess that what I'm trying to convey to you is that at UNAM, academia is active, academia is errantry, in the search of the unknown in the equation. And activism has academic orientations. An active academia and academic activism are the axes that cross its pedagogies. If you're interested in intervening inside reality, if you're studying and looking for intensity and significance, not only a grade inside an academic space, which enhances and strives for change through the invitation to intervene and to make sense of women protests, UNAM is for you. I offer you a window with a shade of light, which made visible some very personal ways of defining UNAM through our classroom and pedagogical methodologies. I have tried to convey a way of looking at problems and tensions that stresses justice, equality, and uneven relation of power and bridges to cross those borders. This brings me to the end and to the third dispositive, addressing Mexico through its borders. Obvious borders, like the one encompassing Mexico and the USA, bounded by the most traveled, crossed, and biggest border of the world. I think you know that this is the biggest border of the world and the most crossed. Gloria Anzaldúa, a Tejana, a Chicana writer, a poet, and an activist, born in Texas in 1944, wrote in her famous book, Borderlands, The New Mestiza. The US-Mexico border es una herida abierta, where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. And before a scab forms its hemorrhages against the lifeblood of two worlds, merging to form a third one, a border collar is created. Borders are set up to define the places that are safe and unsafe, to distinguish us from them. A border is a dividing line, a narrow strip along a steep edge. At UNAM, we cross many borders, which point at the urgent necessity to create a new culture, which encompasses those who need education the most, the poorest, through cultural, technological, and egalitarian education. When I offer you to locate you at the borders, what I meant was to situate the possibilities of this enormous and powerful university in between academia and activism, in between professionalization and formation of critical students with a strong sense of equity, freedom, and social justice, and a special tendency to service, to produce knowledge where there are social urgencies. In between situated and errant classrooms, which can travel to plazas, to streets, to the sites of protest and prison patios. In between technology, interdisciplinary languages, and artistic practices. I will finish by situating you at the borders between academia and activism through a window to critical knowledge, in my case, referring to the field of gender, cultural studies, cultural critique, but also decolonial studies. As Anzaldúa expresses, borders are to define, to distinguish from them, the safe and the unsafe, and they respond to a dividing line, but they're also there to unite and to build bridges. So I will finish with an exploration of the main themes of this PhD in gender. After the window, the crack, the border, we're going to pick on this window of gender studies. And we have more than 150 graduate programs. Many of them are related to gender. And I would underline the programs of gender that had to do with access to justice, that had to do with pedagogy, that had to do with rights and law. And I had to do now, which is the year of care, with the problem of care. And there are thousands, there are many, but this would be, and also, you know, if you're interested in gender and the relation of art with social justice, the whole different forms that artistical practices can derive in creating consciousness and producing a set of practices that help making sense of the necessity of justice and equality, that will be, and around anthropology and politics and pedagogy. This will be the things that are spread out in many different disciplines. Our PhD is arranged in 4 different research lines, but it studies a very theoretical one. It studies, on the one hand, the epistemological and historical backgrounds and the foundations of a critical view of social-cultural processes, but very much ingrained through intersectionality and gender. So one of the first lines will be sexual difference, representation and transformation, and the whole issue of transsexuality is huge with us. we are trans supporters and transdisciplinary and transsexuality, transdifference, and we explore it with, and masculinities, we explore it with high profundity. Here are the, well, this is the first, the first is theoretical studies and methodological studies in gender and feminism. That was the former, which I told you, epistemology, and all this theoretical language to talk about sexuality, which is at the center of this proposal. Identity, bodies, all the issue around bodies is very important. That's it, Butler, but with us, we have all, of course, we study Butler and we study all the Anglo-American theories, but we explore very much the Latin American ones, Silvia Rivera Chicanqui, and Rita Laura Segato, a whole array of Latin American thinkers that will do, you know, the counterpart or complementary or just another view of your Butlers and all of Judith Butler and other incredible theories that are, of course, read, but also discussed in a conversation by our Latin American feminist authors. A lot of gender and public policy. We do a lot of public policy. There is a special need to develop a political thinking and a lot of pedagogy around alliances and create a political discourse that would talk to the very different issues and challenges, but in a political way. What are the alliances and what are the glossary, the vocabulary that we need to stress out in order to create bridges and not burn them? Gender, science, and technology. If you're lean to complexity and paradoxes, if you want to look at brightness right into the eye, and you tend to move your thoughts on social justice, UNAM is for you. It's also an invitation to do very complex theory and you know, conceptual thought, but since we have so many problems and in different avenues and issues and in relation to gender, there are so many different interdisciplinary developments. And we have created a lot of different bachelor degrees and masters and PhDs that are gender or related to gender. I have stressed here more the issues around law, justice, art, and pedagogy, but you can find much more links that can serve your interest in issues around gender and intersectionality, race, sexuality, and class. I really invite you to come here and get a peek on these cracks, lean to these windows and cross these borders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marisa. And we have some questions. The first one, I think it's a very nice question. All of them are very nice questions, but is from Sebastian Greer, and he's asking, can international students apply to UNAM postgrado programs?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. See, of course you can apply, and you got a scholarship. Maybe it is granted that if you apply and you enter, you got a scholarship, of course. And we have around 150 different graduate programs. And also a very free way to circulate inside the program. So we are trying to liberate, you are the heroes of freedom inside the curriculum, no? Since bachelor, you can have astronomy and sports and then quantum mechanics. And we, in our bachelor, we have only one theme, but we got good on freedom, on relations, and to pick different issues and themes around graduate teaching. So yes, of course. I actually have two students from the USA. One is studying border art, the whole art that is produced through the muralism and crossing borders, and another that is studying issues around fanzines and other type of magazines in relation to gender in the 70s. Yes, of course.
Thank you, Marisa. And if I might add, Sebastian, there is a Fulbright-García Robles grant for graduate studies in Mexico. So I invite you to visit our webpage. If Marian can help us writing the email address, I mean the webpage address there, you can find it under grants for US students, and we do give grants for those that want to do a master's degree or a PhD. So there are some other questions, Marisa. The first one from Maria Fernanda Cruz Islas. She is saying, thanks for sharing this presentation with us. I want to ask if there is anything being done that can be done from the intersection between language study and the law regarding gender violence in Mexico.
In between language?
Between language study and law regarding gender violence.
I don't understand language studies. Is it literature? Is it, what is language studies? Can you explain a little bit?
Maybe yes, or
there's
literature or linguistics, maybe. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. There is a lot being researched around law, gender, and let's say literature. A lot about literature, and in relation to language, I don't know, but I would be surprised if we don't have anything in relation to language studies, because of course the language of the law is incredibly sophisticated, and gender studies is always intervening in this, so to say, patriarchal or hegemonic way to name, no? To name the place and the situation of women around crime, no? So yes, I think what is huge with us is the intervention on penal law and juridical law through critical criminology from a gender perspective. And I think that is a theme that can be of interest. But you can get inside the, let me see, the Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas, the Juridical Research Institute.
Legal Research Institute.
And you can browse into the gender, they have a gender place, and I'm sure they are having tensions with that precise theme of juridical language, which is a space to intervene.
Thank you, Marisa. Then, and Maria Fernanda is also asking if you would be willing to share an email address if.
Sure. Yes, let me write it. Should I write it down here?
Yes, in the chat you can write it.
Of course. Since the fourth wave, women collective feminist groups have been very active in opening seminars and courses, and UNAM is a really not only gender friendly, that would be light. We're feminists. It's a feminist institution. Okay,
so we have another question, and this one is here. Yeah. And it says, you mentioned what is happening in the United States with Roe v. Wade. What is your perspective on this regression of women's reproductive rights in the US at odds with Mexico's recent steps to legalize and decriminalize abortion at the state level and in the Supreme Court?
I think for everybody, we saw in the age of Trump, we saw all this careful and blatant and gross construction of the Supreme Court to undermine not only that, which is huge, but other advance. I see that this is what feminists and what my teachers told me. Don't get none of your advance for granted, because everything can go away. So I think this is a a blow into the ears and into the eyes. And we have to stand and fight back. In Mexico now we have an advance which is incredible. The Supreme Court ruled for the legality of abortion and 12 weeks and difference, but we are advancing on that and on that terrain. But in the 2000s we were withdrawing. We had abortion as a criminal act. I mean, women were in prison because they lost the baby, and mainly poor women and in the rural areas, when they were brought to the hospitals because they had a hemorrhage, because they had an abortion, provoked or occasional, they were put in the chains in the bed of the hospital, and they were brought to justice. And they were indigenous poor women, and we're counting now. We are, as director of the Center of Gender Studies, we are now involved in a project, and we're counting the women that are in jail because of this women, and we want to free them. So we're on that. And you guys, I mean, we are with you. You know, I cannot understand that this can happen in the US. But we're together with you. Well, I think a lot of different things will happen because a lot of groups will raise their voice, and it won't be possible.
We have another question from an anonymous attendee that says, do you offer classes about gender and environment, gender and nature, or gender and climate change? I am interested in reading more about this topic.
Yes, and there are a lot of classes in anthropology and also in the PhDs and masters related with gender and environment and ecology. Yes, we have around 150 different PhDs and graduate studies. You can enter the graduate studies programs, and yes, we have a lot of different projects related to ancient and modern, but mixed indigenous knowledges that relate to political and really forms of government that are based on all these relations to nature and to this kind of knowledge that is based in indigenous traditions, but but really modernized and put into practice in Peru, in Bolivia, in Mexico. So this is huge. This is big. And also the other universities like Autónoma Metropolitana in La Ciudad de Mexico and also Ibero. But Mexico is the place for, and Peru and Bolivia and Colombia, other places for studying the relation of this ancient and also not only ancient, but they are being practiced in a quotidian way. So they are ancient, but they are being reproduced, and I don't want to say modernized, but yes, they are current, and they are also mixed with some scientific facts of modernity. So it's highly interesting what is going on, and it's going on mainly in the fields of women in relation to water, the fight for territory, and extractivism. It's what is called also decolonial studies, and this is huge in Mexico and in Latin America.
So Lupita Montoya, who will be a Fulbright-García Robles grantee next year, and she is asking, have you worked on any projects looking at the Mexican Americans in science and technology in the US and their role in environmental and social justice?
I personally, I'm not related to that, but in the fields of sciences, we have Julia Carabias, and we have programs in bioethic and also in ecology. And I'm sure you can look at that. There's a program on ecology, and it is directed by Julia Carabias. Let me write it down so you can look at her. She's a professor. She was the head of the Ministry of Ecology in the 2000, and she's a brilliant woman, and she has a lot of, and you can, I'm sure you can write to her. She's very open extremely, extremely knowledgeable of those things.
Thank you. Then there is a follow-up question regarding the Roe v. Wade. And it says, what can U.S. activists and policymakers learn from current Mexican feminist movements?
What? Say that again?
Yes, what can U.S. activists and policymakers learn from the current Mexican feminist movement?
Well, we are feminists and activists, and the current feminist movements are very much facing violence and feminicide and disapparition. And these women are extremely active in the public space and also extremely active at the university. They have learned to say stop, basta, and they are very aggressive. And I don't know if non-violent or using violence when I don't want to say it, but I almost when it is necessary. And sometimes I must say also, you know, going too much on that direction. But what we have learned is that we have to pay attention to what young women say now. We have to, but because if we don't, they will take the streets, they will intervene, and they will non-stop with protesting and intervening. And there's a moment to pay attention. And at our university, we have learned, we created this gender studies coordination, which has more than 80 different advocates, professors, and activists. And it's very active around the whole university. And we have also created in every single building and discipline a space called the Commission of Equity and Gender. And they ruled around harassment and sexual offenses. And they also ruled in the curriculum, the seminars and courses that have to be open for everybody. And also many activities to give formation to professors and students. So what we have learned is to pay attention, to hear and to construct a very powerful and meaningful structure to attend not only harassment and sexual offenses, but all these kind of knowledges in relation to law, ecology, nature, pedagogy that are derived from feminism and gender studies. And we are doing a great job at UNAM. We're dealing with it. We're constructing, we're adopting, we're opening. It's a joy. And also, of course, there's many problems, but it's a joy to be part of this moment. It's a full of energy of transformation. And it's a public university, and we are not corporative at all. Of course, we want economy, and we need to collect more money, but we are not a corporative institution. We are a public university.
Thank you, Marisa. I think we don't have any more questions. I don't know if you want to give any closing statement, and then we will have Winnie Hofstede from the embassy who would like to give some words to close this series.
Yeah, Latin America, and of course the United States also, and Canada, but Latin America is in a revolution. Women are in the streets, women are taking over classrooms and campuses. And if you're interested in gender studies and interested in hearing what is going on, and interested in how to understand and derive let's say the narrative of protest into an academic project, and also the other way around, how an academic project can cross to activism. This is Latin America. We are in a it's not a reform. We are in a refulgent moment, in a moment full of light, and of course many problems. No, we have violence, we have crime, but we have also, in relation to gender and intersectionality, a lot of different projects and possibility, and a huge and very strong political movement in relation to very young feminist groups. And also the issues of sexuality are very interesting. What is happening in new sexual organizations of desire, so to say, transsexuality and binary sexuality and non-sexuality, non-identity of any sexual origin is also huge. The research on transsexuality and diversity in sexual orientation is also very important for us. And also in relation to art, Mexico is huge on art. And there are a lot of different feminist artists that are doing murals, for example. It's huge. We have now, this is the year of muralism in Mexico. And I want to show you some murals, but time wasn't enough. And I would have loved to show you more murals. In my university, we have around 130 murals. Imagine the size of a place that can host 130 murals, not muralitos, but murals, huge, the overtaken of walls. So a very important political moment, a very transcendental pedagogical moment, and of course, a very strategic moment for access to justice for women in Mexico and Latin America. Immersed in the whole amount of paradoxes that you can imagine and contradictions, but this is true. It's a shed of light, it's refulgent, it's blazing, it's enormous, and it's very energetic.
There is actually one more question on the chat. It says, is UNAM working with any universities in the US on the gender harassment initiatives?
A lot. We work with Berkeley, with NYU, we work with Rutgers, we work with Miami. Yes, a lot. We work a lot. I mean, it's an ongoing working with American and US universities. It's a nonstop. It's nonstop. And according to gender, the US is fantastic on this. And Latin America is also another way of dealing with this, but we have strong resonances and we work together in many, many avenues.
Thank you. Well, Winnie, I think we're ready for you.
All right. Well, oh, wait, I thought I put on my video. Hang on. Okay, well, should it not work? I'll just go ahead. Oh, there it goes. Okay, great. Well, I'd like to first of all, thank everybody for attending. And I'd like to thank our speaker. Forgive me, I will do my very best. Dr. Marisa Belausteguigoitia. Not bad. And it sounded like it was a very interesting discussion and certainly very timely, very important. So thank you very much for that. I'd also like to note that this is the last of our 5-part speaker series. And I want to thank Hazel and our partners at Comexis for making this happen. Same in the Department of State and the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs for supporting this effort. And if you attended this event but weren't able to catch the other 4, then we will hopefully be able to be putting these up, archived versions of these, so that you and we encourage you to share with others can watch those or watch them multiple times. We think that they're really valuable information for learning to study, for learning about Mexico. And we encourage you, everyone, to give serious thought to either Mexican studies or coming to Mexico to participate in in-person exchange. And so with that, I'd like to thank you on the part of the U.S. Embassy for your kind attention and what sound like excellent questions. Dr. Marisa, did you have a question? No, okay. Okay, and with that, thank you very much. And please, if you have any ideas, I hope that you'll contact us about how we might encourage, more sessions like this to promote this kind of study, information about Mexico and study. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a great week.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ana.
A ustedes, hasta la próxima.